Hi, everybody. My name is Scott Hanselman. You can follow me on Twitter, and you can actually Google for Scott. Turns out I've got that locked down. It's me and Scott toilet paper. So we're in an epic battle with Scott brand tissue. So when you blog about this later, make sure that you link my name, Scott. You know, I saw this guy, Scott, link. That gives me the Google juice that allows me to defeat Scott brand toilet paper. Because they don't deserve to be, really, you Google Scott looking for toilet paper? I don't think you do. You're looking for me, of course. So we need to stop them. Anything you can do to help. I've got a podcast you might check out. It's called Hansel Minutes, but you can also go freshairfordevelopers.com. It's got a lot of really interesting people, a lot of topics that are, it's not a Microsoft, I do work for Microsoft, by the way, sorry. It's not a Microsoft podcast, but I've had all sorts of really interesting people. That's the CTO of NASA. She runs SaaSConf. This guy had a #1 app on the App Store. So really interesting topics. Check it out. I also done another show called This Developer's Life, which is a ripoff of This American Life. So much so that Ira Glass called me, was lawyer, called me, and they said it was okay. They said it was cool. So until he calls me back and says I can't use the name, check out This Developer's Life, which is also nice. I've got another show called Ratchet and the Geek. So I'm trying to take over NPR is basically what I'm trying to tell you people. So it's really fun. So I work here. Actually, I work in Portland. I work in Portland, Oregon on the Forest Moon remotely for Microsoft. I work on Azure. But I work in open source, which is way better. Microsoft is not nearly as organized as it would have to be as evil as you think that it is. We're really, really disorganized. Now, I started in open source, and I went to work for Microsoft about 5-6 years ago to basically open source stuff at Microsoft, to open source as much as I possibly could. And when I went to work for Microsoft, people were calling me a sellout, and it really hurt, because coming from the open source community to go work for the man at Microsoft, I was really sad. I was crying a lot, and I didn't really know how to console myself. And somehow, though, I found the inner strength to make myself to feel better about the decision about working for Microsoft. So after the fact now, I feel okay about it. But at the time, before Microsoft, it was a difficult time. That's me. But now after Microsoft, you may have seen me in Gulliver's Travels. It's a pretty cool place to work, actually. The org chart is really simple at Microsoft. It's really easy to understand. So what I want to talk to you all about is the cloud and the browser, and I'm going to juxtapose these two things. And this is, all of these stories that I'm going to tell you are true, except the ones that I totally made up. I was talking to a gentleman at Intel. I was giving a talk at Intel on how to do web development, and a particular individual came up to me, and I think he was probably in his mid to late 70s, and he had been at Intel for like 40 years. And he was what you call a neckbeard. Now, a neckbeard is a gender non-specific role. This is, you've been doing something for 40 years. So that means you probably have forgotten more about that topic than I will ever know. So I was a little intimidated when this individual came up to me and said, I want to be a web developer. I'm like, well, what have you been doing for the last 40 years? He'd been doing like microcode, like internals of Intel processors. He was a C programmer. He was an assembly language person. He had actually missed out in the last 20 years. So imagine your non-technical grandparent with a PhD in computer science and an AOL account. That was this person. So I'm thinking to myself, what do you do with someone who understands computers at like a fundamental level, gets computer science, but can barely email his grandkids? How do you teach them the web? And the exciting part of it, though, is that there's room over here, lots of room, guys. He missed the tribulations, right? All the crappy parts about the web, like tables. He totally missed that part. 1-pixel transparent GIFs. Think about all the horrible stuff that we've done over the last 20 years to build this crap application platform that we call the internet. He's missed all that. Now, just to give a sense about how old this person was, here's a selfie that he took. Really, really old person. So I said, well, let's talk about how I'm going to teach you this. I said, well, there's this quote. This is a great quote. There's a world market for maybe 5 computers. There's this theory that this person from IBM said this, right? We've all heard this quote before. I don't know if Thomas J. Watson actually said this. I couldn't find a picture of Thomas J. Watson, but I do have this really old book. So we're just going to make that the guy. So when he said there was a world market for 5 computers, he was thinking about like refrigerator type computers, right? There would be like the South American machine. Like he would sell a machine to South America and they would have a computer and that would be the only one South America would need. And all the South Americans would send batch jobs to that thing. And that's kind of what happened though. This actually happened, right? There's like the Microsoft Cloud and the Bookstore Cloud and the Google Cloud and the whoever else cloud. It's just that they're clouds of little machines as opposed to one giant refrigerator that we thought it was going to happen. This is happening. Now, here's a picture of the Azure Cloud. I work at Microsoft on the Azure Cloud. We are a little behind. I recognize that. But we recently got color, so we're feeling pretty good about the kind of upgrades that Azure is putting in right now. So feel good about that. Here's a picture of me unloading one of the new Azure Cloud machines. So I asked him what he knew about the cloud. I said, what do you understand about the cloud? And he's like, well, you know, for us, if I want a virtual machine, I have to go and fax this form to IT to provision the VM. Like, some of you laugh because that's true. Like, you've done that before. You had to get a signature, like an actual piece of paper. Like, who has a pen anymore, right? I don't know. Can we do this on an iPad? We can't. To requisition, and then 2 weeks later, IT graces him with the creation of a virtual machine, right? The cloud is the promise of elasticity and on demand. And he's like, okay, well, I kind of get the cloud, but talk to me about virtualization. I said, well, remember this diagram that we kind of all learned in computer science class. These are the characteristics of an operating system. To be an operating system, you have to have storage APIs and networking. You have to have multi-threading, usually. You have to have memory management. All of that is an operating system. Now, he had been working on the hardware stuff. He knew all about this. So he's like, yep, I get that. That is the characteristics of an operating system. All right, so given that, virtualization is when you lie to the machine and you say that the hardware part is not really there, right? You're literally lying to the operating system. The operating system doesn't know it's being virtualized. And then you get portability. I can take my machines from my data center to the cloud, to someone else's cloud. That's amazing. I can pick stuff up and move it somewhere else. And I remember the very first time that I saw virtualization. Does anyone remember like when they ran like VMware for the first time? But even before that, does anyone run like QEMM or Desk View, and you have like DOS and then Windows in a window, all in text mode? I mean, those were the days, right? That was amazing. When I upgraded my machine to 4 megs of RAM, it was a very exciting time. And now we can do stuff like run Linux in Azure. Like, how is that okay? I asked my boss, like, how are we running, like, 25% of Windows Azure runs Linux. Why is that a good thing? And my boss says, what do you think it's running on? Oh, it's running on Windows. Oh, so we're doing okay then, right? He's like, yeah, we're doing just fine. Turns out Microsoft wants to sell you 3 things: Office, Windows, and Azure. And if you don't buy Windows and Office, then we'll try to make Azure a really good cloud. That's the general idea. So you can go up to VM Depot. If you go on Google with Bing for VM Depot, no, just Google with Google. You're not going to find anything with Bing. Go to VM Depot. There are thousands of open source virtual machines, all Linux based. So if I want to grab like this Jenkins VM, it'll actually give me the command line that I need to go and create this VM. So then I can go to my command line and the Azure command line. All of this is open source, by the way. This is the team I work on. This is written in Node, in fact. So I can go and say Azure, and we've got ASCII art, which is awesome. And you say Azure, make a virtual machine, and then you fire that virtual machine up in the air. And he's like, that's amazing, that's great, right? So I don't have to fax people anymore. And I say, well, but the cloud is more than that. To look at the cloud as VMs in the sky is a simplistic way to look at the cloud. That's IaaS, right? We've heard that term IaaS, infrastructure as a service. Those are virtual machines. And the thing about virtual machines that suck is that you have to feed them and keep them watered. They're like a dog. I don't have pets. I assume you have to water the dog at some point. I don't like animals. Virtual machines are like, free like a puppy. I was like, oh, thanks for the thing I have to keep alive. I never understood why you give people like flowers, dead flowers. Like, go get well soon, watch these die. Virtual machine just means I have to run apt-get upgrade, all the time. And is it upgrade or update? I never remember. I just run apt-get upgrade and apt-get update, and then another upgrade, and then another update, just to make sure it's completely done, because I don't really know. That's the world on the Linux side. On the Windows side, it's even worse, because what happens on Windows is you're typing and you're doing your thing and you're in the type, and then your hand is about to come down to press enter, and then time slows down because the Windows update dialog is coming, and the restart now button is like the default button, and there's nothing that you can do to stop it. You're going to reboot right now, and I don't care what you're working on. It's not interesting or important. And there's only one thing on the planet that can actually stop Windows from restarting. Do you know what that is? It's a dirty notepad. That dialog right there. If that's running, Windows cannot stop. Even if you unplug it from the wall, it cannot stop. It is not responding. You may not have heard about my Halloween costume this year. I'm going as Microsoft Outlook. I'm going to actually hook up a shower curtain, and I'm going to have like this opaque kind of, you can almost see me, and it's going to say not responding. And then I'm just going to walk around and refuse to speak to anyone. That will stop. So I actually keep a shortcut to Notepad on my desktop just to stop things from rebooting, because you never know when you might need to do that. So I would just keep that tip for those of you who have to sysadmin Windows machines. Virtual machines, though, you can do anything on them. You can run, frickin' Erlang. They renamed it recently. But you have to manage the operating system. That sucks. Now, cloud apps have like a foot in each world where, the cloud will manage the updates and you can do anything you want. But the really interesting stuff, in my opinion, because I'm a web developer, is running like websites, like that kind of Heroku style of things where it's elasticity. You put something in a container, whether it be Docker, or whether it be Heroku, or something like Elastic Beanstalk. The operating system manages the updates, and you do anything that you want. And in the case of Azure, you can run in all those different languages. And actually, we added Java too. This is hard to explain, though, so I like to explain it like this. Running a virtual machine is like owning your first home, right? You have to keep that house maintained. You have to clean the gutters and stuff. Like if you've ever owned a house, you'll realize immediately that there's way more stuff to maintain than ever before. And if you move in the next day, there's like a leaky faucet and there's no super to call. But running a website is like thrashing your hotel room, which, by the way, mine is totally thrashed right now. And it just magically gets put back together like the next day. You don't have to do anything at all. It's completely managed environment, which is super awesome. So I'm telling this to my friend at Intel, and he's like, wait a second, so building a web farm, this skill that I have developed over many, many years in the industry, I've been doing this for 25 years, software. I used to be the guy that they would call to set up the Cisco local director or the F5 and get the web farm working, and it would be like a multi-day process to set up a web farm. Has anyone ever done that manually? This is where the generation gap, and this is where you kids with your, this is where I turn into the grumpy old man. Because my years of professional networking and web farm development experience is now a slider bar. I used to put these things together, and it would take a weekend. And then now the young people are like, oh, this web farm is taking minutes to spin up. This sucks. It's like, Louis C.K., where everything is amazing and no one's happy. Oh, this deployment's taking minutes. Blah, blah, blah. That's my little kid voice. I don't really have one. Anyway, he's like, that's amazing. So you're telling me that all that experience in my life totally doesn't mean anything? And I was like, yes, you're absolutely right. But the business now thinks about things at a much higher level. In the old days, the cloud was me. Like, my boss would be like, go and scale. Cloud, I don't even know your name because you're an underling, right? And that meant that I would have to go to like PC Micro Center and like buy the thing and like assemble it. And then on Monday, the boss is like, look at the cloud, it's scaled. Nice job, cloud, pat, pat, pat. Now I can do that and then charge my customers like I did something, right? And I can work from home, which is really, really awesome. I do that a lot, actually. I'm mostly just playing Steam. So I can do the same thing from the command line. Azure Site Scale Instances 3. And this is the part that kills me. Like, you need to understand, you have to be in the industry 20 years to understand the pain of that line, updating a server farm. That sucks. I mean, just imagine, like, the whole third page of my resume is like gone now. It was entirely doing that line. And that is like we're standing on these shoulders of giants, but it's pretty amazing stuff. So within Azure, we can do that kind of stuff, and it's cool, and we've got, like, we can get to the JSON directly. If I say Azure Site --JSON, all these API calls are entirely out there and open. So people are doing Chef and Puppet and automation of their own stuff. They're writing bash scripts. They're doing this stuff where it's like file new company, and they just deploy. And it's pretty cool. This is actually happening. I'll tell you about a story in a little bit about how Netflix basically pushed a button and deployed to Europe. It's pretty amazing stuff. So I'm explaining this to my friend at Intel, and he's having trouble, like, emotionally processing this level of abstraction. It's blowing his mind. So I showed him how I made a site. I did a node site right there. I did a git deploy, put it in Azure, scaled it out to a server farm, and then started hitting it with traffic. And he was just like, what just happened? And I said, magic. Because you don't have enough Shia LaBeouf as Doug Henning gifs in your life. Thank you. So he says, well, what language do I have to learn, right? All the kids are learning Node, or maybe I learned C#, or maybe it's PHP. And I was like, whatever you do, not PHP. No, I'm just kidding. I said the cloud doesn't care about language choice. That's the great thing about the server side. Do whatever language makes you happy. And he's like, but I want to pick the right one. Everyone's always asking this, whether it's a 40-year veteran, what language do I pick? Or whether it's a brand new person coming out of the Flatiron School, what language do I pick? Honestly, there's two languages you need to know. JavaScript and any systems language. Meaning something on the back end and something on the front end, and it doesn't matter. Do frickin' Erlang, I don't care. He was a C person. I said, C# or Java, it's all going to have little curly mustache brackets, and you're going to feel comfortable. That's all that really matters. But the cloud does not care. In the case of Azure that I work on, .NET, Node, Java, PHP, C++, Python, doesn't matter. He thought that was amazing. He couldn't believe that either. That's my mom. She's really concerned about this whole thing. Anything you want. And in the case of the Microsoft stuff, it's all open source. He thought that was surprising too. In fact, all the Azure stuff is up on GitHub. So all the SDK, everything I'm showing you, it's entirely open source. And not fake open source like Microsoft used to do stuff. We would call that open source. It was actually source opened. It was like, look, some source. No, don't touch, just look. Look at that. It's a zip file, but enjoy. No, we're actually doing all the development on GitHub right now, so it's pretty cool. Now, the thing I said before about the raising of the level, the business person's level, the idea that the boss would say to you, scale this web farm out, is really significant. Because what's the boss thinking? Like, push whatever magic button you have and scale. That's the boss's thing. Because the business problem is scale. But then there's the yak shaving. Are you familiar with yak shaving? Anyone not familiar with yak? No, not okay. So yak shaving, Y-A-K, you can go and Google this. Yak shaving is all of the stuff that you need to do before you do the thing that you were asked to do. Okay, so can you scale that system out? Well, we need to make sure the network switch is going to support that. And I don't know if do you use session? I'm not sure if session affinity. What are you doing? Why aren't you scaling out the server? Well, hang on, I need to shave this yak. And then I will be able to do those things. That is the problem. The business problem is do that, and the technical problem is shave this yak. And then when you're done, things get done. And that can be really overwhelming. But if you're an architect in the cloud, you're going to be thinking about things at a different level. I was at this conference, and I met this guy named Adrian Cockcroft. He was a chief architect for a while at Netflix. He was a super cool guy, PhD in, I don't know, I went to a community college, I have no idea. PhD in unsolvable numbers, we'll say. And he's English, right, which totally sucks. So he's English, he's nattily dressed, and he's got a bow tie, and he's English, so he basically shows up with like +2 charisma right there, I mean, he's rolling numbers that I can't even understand. So he gives his presentation on what it's like to work at Netflix, and he's talking about how the number of IOPS. You know about IOPS, right? Input operations per second. So typically in the cloud, you get 500 IOPS per disk per second. And different clouds can let you turn that up a bit. You can say, well, I want SSD on this cloud. So on those machines, we're going to have 3,000 IOPS. And in the case of them moving on, they were on Amazon, Adrian Cockcroft, chief architect of Netflix, is like, okay, it's going to be $3 instead of $1. So I can go from 500 IOPS for $1 to 3,000, 6 times more for $3. That's great. Netflix, hey everyone, we're going to SSD. So he does that. And he gives this talk, and it's amazing, and I can't do an English accent, but just imagine a really cool Englishman, just, oh, Netflix, oh, SSD, oh, PhD. And he gives this talk, and it's silent. Are there any questions? And then this young person from, they were in Denmark or Sweden, we were somewhere in Scandinavia. Scandinavian kid comes up, and he's like, oh, actually, I can't do Scandinavian. Actually, Mr. Cockcroft, SSDs with the trim, and they have, a lot of sector failures. My SSDs, anecdotally have, and he basically says, you're an idiot. SSDs fail all the time. You totally suck. You don't know me, but I know more than you do. Why are you, chief architect of Netflix, switching to SSDs? You putz. That's the subtext. Okay, it's implied. It's implied in what he says. And we're all just like, oh. What's he going to do? Right? It's going to be amazing, whatever it's going to be, because he's chief architect of Netflix. So what's he going to say? And he sits there and he goes, well, young man, it's not my problem, I'm renting them. It's Amazon's problem. SSDs fail. So the heck what? We're switching to SSDs, but I'm renting them. I don't care. It's a financial decision. 6 times more perf, 3 times more money. Why is this even a conversation? I don't care if 1/3 of them fail. Amazon's got a problem. That's the cloud. That's so cool. What was so great about this is that the person who totally challenged him, and by the way, never challenge an Englishman on stage, ever, for any reason. I did not do well in Europe because as soon as I showed up, it was like, America! And immediately, -2 charisma. I was digging myself out of a hole. This person, it was like a ninja. Like, I don't know how to do the ninja move because I am largely sedentary, but you know how the ninja does the little chop thing and then like the Black Widow goes, like, I don't know how to do that, which way you're supposed to go when you chop, but there's like a move. And his head had been chopped off and it was actually sliding down, and he didn't know he was cut. So his dead body is sitting there floating because Adrian Cockcroft said something amazing. Let me see if I can show you an animated GIF of what it was like. So he asked him a question, and Adrian Cockcroft takes the grenade, hits it with a gun, and blows him up. That's how awesome that answer was. It's not my problem, I'm renting them. Boom. Netflix. Boom. Now, he was English, so in my mind, I imagined he dropped the mic, but it was like a lavalier mic, so it was more of like a bink, and he was like, Netflix. But that was mostly in my mind, but it was amazing. So they've got this dashboard, right, that lets them, this is the Azure Dashboard, but just imagine any good cloud has this dashboard that shows you how much money you're spending and where the system is running and what your requests are like. It's a totally different level. We're used to running like top. And while we're doing that, which is great, people are building these insane dashboards. And, well, that's probably not the good example of a dashboard, but they're building these dashboards, and we're like, now I've got all the dashboard I need. We're going to upgrade the dashboard today. H-top. Yeah, you're like, he was like, top, that's some BS. Boom, H-top. That's right, son. Yeah. Z-top, boom. Yeah. That's just better. I can tell what's going on. That's my dashboard. That's better like Luigi's better. You think Mario's better? You don't know. Luigi's better. Everybody knows Luigi's better. Why are you even going to come at me with this Mario stuff? Luigi, son. Boom. So I'm talking to this gentleman from Intel, and we're getting our head around what's going on the server side. But now I said, let's start thinking about the browser. Let's imagine what's going on in the browser, how we communicate, how we architect systems that talk to the browser. Remember this. Those are the characteristics that one needs to make up an operating system, right? Memory management, graphics subsystems, and things like that. Now, there was a time when you would sit down at a machine like this, and the work was really happening on a machine that looked like this. And you would go and start to run your program, and that, oh, I'm sorry, hang on. There we go. You would run your program, and it would be running over here. But it was a lie, because all the work was happening here, right? That was the VT100 terminal days. I used to actually this is a true story, tell me if anyone else has done this. I actually used to telnet to cdconnection.com, telnet, and send my credit card streaming across the open internet and buy CDs from cdconnection.com. Anyone else do that? No? I think that makes me the most connected person here. I was Scott at AOL.com. That's how old school I am. I was like 000, comma 0001 at CompuServe. That's how, no, not really, but that would be cool though. This is the first page of the web. Okay? That's the original page. This is actually cool because that page is back. It was gone and they put it back at the same URL because cool URLs don't change. This is what Tim Berners-Lee put up and said, this is going to be the web and this is great. And it was meant as kind of this infinite book. It wasn't an application platform, it was hypermedia, right? It was meant to connect physicists and people who were going to blow up the world to each other. And an interesting story about this, the World Wide Web and Tim Berners-Lee, there's a guy at my work named Heinrich that I met in a kitchen once. I was up at Microsoft, I drive up from Portland to visit. So I'm in the kitchen and I'm talking to this very nice guy, Heinrich, and then he leaves. And then as he leaves, this buddy of mine is standing there and he's like vibrating. I'm like, what's wrong, dude? And he says, do you know who that was? I was like, it was a very nice guy named Heinrich. What's the big deal? And he goes, he invented HTTP. I'm like, uh-oh. I was like, did I say anything bad about HTTP? Like, did I insult HTTP when I wasn't looking? So I went on Wikipedia, and immediately, you know, when you Google someone, and then on the right-hand side there's a picture of them, you know you're in trouble, right? It's one thing to find them in the first page. It's another thing when Google's like, oh, that guy? And like, here's the Wikipedia page. Oh, you didn't recognize him? We do. He has a Wikipedia page. I do not have a Wikipedia page. I actually have a page at Wikipedia talking about why I don't have a Wikipedia page. True story. I have like why Scott Hanselman was deleted. And the top vote was not notable. So to just give you a sense of what we're talking about, this is real, check it out. So I go and look at the HTTP spec. First name, Heinrich Nielsen. Tim Berners-Lee's intern. They work together. So now I can't talk to Heinrich because I see him in the hallways and it's like, hey, Heinrich, good job on the internet. What do I do? I mean, I'm like turning into Rain Man every time I see this guy because it's like I get, post, put, delete, like nothing to say. And if you ever feel that you are understating your job title, do not feel bad because apparently even if you invent the greatest thing since the 10 Commandments, you just put web developer. So that's my title, web developer. So Berners-Lee does this amazing thing, and we all start surfing the web, and it's wonderful. And then this happened. How did we know that that happened? When did we hear that this happened? Because we were surfing and doing our thing, and and then Java loaded. And it was this island of interactivity here in the middle of this page. And then these guys were like, we can do it too, whee! And then these guys are like, we still got YouTube, we matter, woo! What were they all trying to do though? What problem were they trying to solve? They were trying to do that. They were trying to make tiny plug-in virtual machines inside of the browser. Because why? Because the web wasn't cutting it. The web wasn't doing what we needed it to do, right? So they went and created this, and they gave it memory management and subsystems and storage and all this kind of stuff, and they stuck it inside of the browser. And unfortunately, though, it was only good for doing stuff like this. I was at Toyota recently, because I have a Prius. I'm from Portland. They gave us a Prius when we're born. We're assigned one. So I go to Toyota, and I don't know about you, but when I get my car fixed, I want to see the system. I want to like look and like, what are y'all working on there? You know, like you ever do that when they're like changing your ticket at the airport? Like, what are y'all using terminals there? It's a hotkey for that. Yeah, sir, stay behind the counter. I'm that guy. So I want to see what they're doing, and usually they had like a VT100. They would terminal into an AS400 in the back, and it was a terminal thing, right? One day I show up at Toyota, and it's changed. They've got Firefox. I'm like, ooh, hey, cool, Firefox. And he's like, hey, the new system. You want to see the new system? Because he knows that I'm the guy that wants to see the new system. And he boots up XP, and I'm like, oh, God. And I didn't even have the heart to tell him, you know what I mean? But I'm like, okay, I'll let that go. So he fires up Firefox, and he goes and he visits this intranet page, and it's like, we're going to run Java. Are you sure? And he's like, yes, I'm sure. And then it's like, the United States government has determined that Java is insecure on the client side. Are you really sure? Click unblock. And he's like, unblock? Yeah, totally. And then it's like, sign your name and your fingerprint, because what you're about to do is going to destroy the world. It's dangerous. Don't use Java. Whatever you're doing, don't use Java. So he uses Java, and he manually loads a jar file that is a terminal emulator that terminals back to the AS400 and then looks to me with a straight face and says, this system is way better than before. It's like, what are we doing? This is not how the internet was supposed to be. Tiny virtual machines within virtual machines. I mean, that's obscene. The only thing, actually, I'll come back and I'll show you something that's even stupider than that in a second here, because that's so profoundly sad that I did not actually know how to process it. Hang on. And blue screen, and blue screen. It's just going to flash at me. That's cool. Let's try this again. Oh, that's comforting. That's an empty room next door. We're just going to watch this guy, and I'll hold up my... Where's my AV dude? All right, I'm going to be holding up my slides here in a second. This is the part where we all get nervous because we're like wondering what's happening. What's happening? I'm just going to start pushing buttons back here. Actually, I should probably just start pushing buttons. There's two of these things plugged in. I'm going to push the one marked input. I'm going to push the one marked input again. Isn't it weird when you push a button seconds before some message you had to read just showed up? What was I supposed to read? I'm afraid to touch my computer now. So we found ourselves in this world where we had this document that Tim Berners-Lee imagined, and then this virtual machine in an island, and then we started just running physics demos. That's all we could think of, was like, I just want like an image mirrored, and I want it to look like water. And apparently we needed an entire virtual machine in order to pull that off. So then this happens. JavaScript starts to come around. But it's not really JavaScript, it's called LiveScript. And it's not really good for anything except typing alert pwned into other people's text fields, right? But the reason that JavaScript was useful, and I remember the moment that I knew that it was going to be something, was when I was typing alert pwned into someone else's text field, and I hit tab, and then that field turned red. We all remember the very first time we saw that, right? And you're just like, did it post back? It did not post back to the server. And you just rip your laptop, maybe I do this, you rip your laptop, you're just like running down the hallway, look, it didn't post back to the server, it's doing client-side validation. And my wife was like, I don't care. And my boss is like, I still don't care. But it's amazing, right? Because suddenly you're thinking, look. And then you realize that Java is to JavaScript as car is to carpet, and ham is to hamster, and iron is to irony. But before that, I thought that they were the same thing. They're not the same thing, right? This is a flow chart about what it's like to work in JavaScript. In case there's any confusion about that. But the first time that I saw that, like, actually validate, I was like, what? And then everyone was like, JavaScript. So people started doing amazing stuff in JavaScript, doing things that we didn't think were possible, doing things like this. Now I'm going to switch the screen here, so let's all Wish luck. Wish us luck. 1,002. We know how to fix it, though, right? All right. You get ready to push input just as many times as possible. Then it'll be awesome. This is a Commodore 64 emulator entirely in JavaScript. And the way that you, because you want to play Galaga, right? The way that you know that something is JavaScript is you right-click on it. And if it says about Flash, you're like, cheater. Anytime anyone does anything amazing on the web, right-click on it. And if it's a plugin, you're a cheater and you suck. And you just slap their laptop to the ground and say, I don't think so. Open web, man. So then I start doing other things like this, which blew my mind. Check this out. This is a complete implementation of a Pentium processor and an implementation of Linux done entirely in JavaScript. It's real. I right-clicked on it. So I'm going to come down here to the bottom just to make the point, and I'm going to run TCC, and I'm going to compile hello world. So now I'm in a browser on a Windows machine running a Linux virtual machine in JavaScript, compiling a C application with TCC. When I did this talk at OSCON, this guy in the front row, why not GCC? I'm running a JavaScript virtual machine in a browser, and you're upset about my choice of C compiler. What kind of open source freak are you? I said, fine, you don't like that? I can give you something that you will really make you happen. I'm going to run a Windows machine, and then I'm going to run an iPhone simulator, and I'm going to run mobile Safari, and then I'm going to put a Linux emulator inside that, and I'm going to run that. And they don't use GCC if you'd shut up. Because I have apparently impulse control problems. Just the fact that we can do that kind of stuff is amazing. And why do we do that? Why would anyone do that? It's because internet. Because you can. Because it's amazing. But it's making an interesting point. It's proving that JavaScript can do crazy stuff. JavaScript is a virtual machine. And if you turn off JavaScript, you're dead. It will kill you. It's true. There are games. This is a Contre-Jour. You can see this at contrejour.ie. Now, 2011 iPad Game of the Year, now written entirely in JavaScript and HTML5 and runs pixel perfect in a browser. So whenever your boss says, well, I don't know if we can do that in JavaScript, I don't think it's possible, show them games that run on iPads running natively in JavaScript. Now, you might think that this is the time when I'll show you, Unreal Engine or Quake. In talks like this, inevitably someone goes and runs Quake in a browser, and then they explain to you how they took C++ and ran it through Clang and through LLVM, and that bytecode turned into ASM.jl. Is this the time in the talk where I'm going to show you Unreal in the browser? No. That would be stupid, because you've seen Unreal running in the browser, and you don't need to see it again. But what you do need to understand, other than Tom Cruise is really, really sad, is that if you take the characteristics of JavaScript and you put that over that diagram that we've been seeing through this entire talk, one could propose, and again, with all analogies, it doesn't work, but bear with me. JavaScript, garbage collection, memory management, we got that. Graphics subsystems, we got WebGL, we got Canvas. Networking, we got WebSockets, we got XHR, we've got real-time, we've got DOM events, web workers, sandboxing, got a tiny database. JavaScript is an operating system that we don't need to install plugins for. Now, Jeff Atwood's law is that any application that can be written in JavaScript will eventually be written in JavaScript. That is true. It is unfortunately also true about Microsoft Excel. And just to make sure that you understand that point, this is an implementation of Pac-Man running entirely in Microsoft Excel, where each individual cell is a pixel. And this is so amazing and so wondrous and so pixel perfect, it actually can't be stopped. This might take several minutes. All right, good. But you can do anything in JavaScript, like it has been proven. And you have two operating systems, including the one that comes on your phone, and then the tiny JavaScript one inside of the browser on your phone. Now, Zuckerberg says no. He doesn't think that this is a good idea. He says that Facebook made a mistake betting on HTML5. And they went and they rewrote all their stuff native. And then, of course, a week later, the folks from Sencha.js went and rewrote Facebook in Sencha and made it run faster than native, which just means that the programmers at Facebook suck. Don't blame JavaScript for your problems. We'll talk about how JavaScript sucks. And it sucks deeply. But you still don't get to blame it for your problems. JavaScript is happening, I think. And one of our great philosophers once said, the avalanche has already begun. It is too late for the pebbles to vote. What a great freaking quote. The mountain is coming down on top of you, and your boss is like, should we really bet on JavaScript? Who said this? Which of our great philosophers said this? Kosh from Babylon 5. Thank you. Whoever said that gets, okay, tacos later. First time. Not enough Babylon 5 people out there. It's a shame. Now, we say HTML5, but HTML5 doesn't really do anything, right? And CSS3 is special. JavaScript is really doing a lot of the work. Now, there's a lot to learn about JavaScript. And it can be a little bit overwhelming, especially for new web designers. There was a time, this is really unfortunate, by the way. There was a time when, all right, got that out of my system. There was a time when HTML tables were the most complicated thing in computer science, where you could come in off the street with no degree and no experience and have someone say, do you know tables? Yes. Yes, I do. Boom. Junior engineer. Do you know row span? I do, in fact, know row span. Yes. And boom, senior engineer. Next thing you know, I'm running the team. I'm running the team because I know tables. But today's HTML is so simple. Like, people are doing one div on like CSS deck, and they'll do an entire iPhone implementation. And like, look at the HTML. It's one div. It's the new challenge. What can I write? I bet you Gmail is just one div. It's just HTML and then body, and that's it, right? And there's a div. ID equals Gmail, and everything else is JavaScript. HTML is just a structure, and CSS provides all that color and style. And CSS, of course, is a well-understood language that is expressive, that gives us the kinds of flexibility and power that, we could only dream of before. And exactly what you expect you're going to get out of CSS is what you end up getting. So CSS is clearly the powerhouse in the space. And the great thing about JavaScript now is that we have books, and we don't need to learn the bad parts of JavaScript. Although stepping through a loop is still super, super dull in JavaScript. Now, John Resig, creator of Jquery's book JavaScript Ninja, has a samurai on the cover because JavaScript is loosely typed. It's there's a ninja, samurai. It's duck typing. So, sorry, I needed to get that joke in there. Now, one time, another great philosopher said that JavaScript is the assembly language of the web. Who said that?
You did.
I did say that. Thank you very much. But everyone else said that too. It's right. It's one of those things. Now, I got a lot of people mad about this, and it got on Reddit, and it was a whole thing. You know how people always say, and then the internet exploded. We always say that. Like, whatever tiny little stupid group you're in, if you're like in a knitting group that does like 3D printed digital knitting, and then someone who's like the father or the mother of digital knitting online says something, and then the internet exploded. No, it didn't. 12 people cared. They just happened to be around you when they cared. So I said that thing, and the internet exploded. So a couple of dozen people argued about it on Reddit. And I went and I said, I'm going to find out if this is true or not. So I asked Brendan Eich. I said, Brendan Eich, is that true? And Brendan Eich said, no, that is Brendan Fraser. Yeah, that is Brendan Eich. But I think that Brendan Fraser is a beautiful, beautiful man. So I'm going to just keep that picture there. So Brendan Eich says, JavaScript is the x86 of the web. But he can't claim that it's original. People supported this idea that it's the x86 of the internet. And actually, I should take a moment just to thank a couple of people in the JavaScript space, like Brendan Eich, like John Resig, Yehuda Katz, who should get here soon, Lisa Larson Kelly, Paul Irish, if you've never met Paul Irish, beautiful, beautiful man, Christian Heilman from Mozilla, and of course, Douglas Crockford. what's great about JavaScript is that you can turn it into, other languages can turn it into JavaScript. So CoffeeScript, which is what a Rubyist wishes JavaScript was, turns into idiomatic JavaScript. And TypeScript, which is what a C# person wishes that JavaScript was, also turns into the identical idiomatic JavaScript. So people are compiling this stuff, but unfortunately, as they do these things, they make layers, hide too much complexity. And you think that you're slick as you build layers on top of layers. But when you think you're slick, you're not. I'm going to do that one more time. Jquery. So if JavaScript is an OS and the browser is a virtual machine then, but people are building stuff on top of maybe libraries that they shouldn't be necessarily leaning on. A lot of times you'll have people come into interviews and you'll say, can you write some JavaScript for me? And they'll write $. I was like, whoa, 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 slow down. Let's not use jQuery. Who said this? No one writes JavaScript anymore, they write jQuery. It turns out that jQuery said that. jQuery, the great thing about when you learn about the existence of jQuery is that I've ruined jQuery for you. You're never going to be able to say jQuery ever again. You're going to go to work and you're like, we should totally get jQuery for this project. And then other people will be like, I don't know if jQuery is available. I'll call his agent. Familiarize yourself with jQuery's work. I encourage you to check out his IMDb page, including Fred the Show, Fred 2, Night of the Living Fred, and now in post-production is Zombievers. So jQuery definitely coming places. So jQuery, great guy. But you build things, you think to yourself, I'm going to build this awesome thing, and I'm doing it in jQuery, and it's going to be great, and here's my vision, and then it ends up turning out differently, and I don't know who to blame for it. But I end up feeling bad, and the result is I don't really even know. So I would encourage people to use Vanilla.js. You guys seen Vanilla.js library? Let me show you this real quick, and then my time is going to be up. Vanilla.js is a really, really powerful new library. And what's great about Vanilla.js is that it's a fast, cross-platform framework. And if you go down here, you can actually pick the things that you want to use. You can say, hey, I need regular expressions and animations. I need Ajax. I need the math library. And it'll build the library for you, and then it'll give it to you to download. Now, it is a little bit larger when it gets gzipped. You got it now? All right, that's a little bit of a joke grenade. You'll get that when you leave. The thing that's great about Vanilla.js is that you already have this library, and putting it into production is really easy. But the message I have for you all is expect more from your web tools. Think about layering. Think about how things fit together. And remember that you have this massive amount of scale and elasticity on the server side. You have your choice of languages. But remind everyone at your company that the browser is really powerful. You have a pocket supercomputer in quad processor accelerated graphics, and I'm using it to argue with people about cat pictures, when I should be using it a little bit more. It has a great JavaScript virtual machine, but we still insist on sending lists of 100 items back to the server for sorting, because the pocket supercomputer that I have probably can't sort or filter data. There's really no actual power here, even though this is 17 or 18,000 times more powerful than ENIAC. Put those users' virtual machines to work and make your clouds not work so hard. Remember that you are powerful and that this is a looping GIF, which is itself amazing. So I told my friend at Intel, you know the cloud, you can program the browser now. I said, get to work. Thank you guys very much.